Okay, now that you've found a qualified tenant that you're going to move into your property, you need to sign and negotiate a lease. Now, we haven't included links to individual places to find a lease, and the reason we didn't do that is because each state is different. So what you need to do is do a search for your state and rent a lease form, something like that. Most of the time it's going to be free. Some of them cost a few bucks, but you need to make sure that the lease is in compliance with your local or statewide landlord-tenant law. Again, do a search for landlord-tenant law in your state or your city, and you need to find a lease that's compliant with your state. Now, everything on the lease is negotiable. The rent amount, the due date for the rent, late fees, maintenance, who pays for what, all that stuff's negotiable. And once you sign the lease and start collecting rent, you're in a legally binding agreement. So just like the tenant is. So you want to make sure that you are very confident with that lease, and you may even want to have an attorney review it. Again, the most important thing though is that you use a lease form that is in compliance with your state real estate laws. Now, it's very typical once you sign the lease to collect the first month's rent, sometimes even the last month's rent and the security deposit. Now, a security deposit, or sometimes called a damage deposit, is an amount of money that you hold in case the tenant doesn't pay their rent or in case they damage the property. Now, you're required in some states to hold this in a separate account, but these funds need to be available when the tenant moves out. If they pay the rent on time and don't do any damage, you have to give it back to them. If they do damage, you can offset it with some of the funds from the security deposit, but not until after they move. Now, one critical thing that sometimes people make mistakes on is do not allow a tenant to move themselves or any of their belongings into the property until you have the funds. And that means the funds are either in your hands, certified funds, or that a check that's already cleared the bank. Because once a tenant, in some states and jurisdictions, once a tenant takes possession of the property, if their check bounces and you want to get them out, you have to go through the entire eviction process. So make sure that you have all the funds in your hand, all the checks have cleared the bank prior to letting someone move into your property. Now, once they move in, you need to let them know when their rent's due. It'll be covered in the lease, but if you want to use a program like My Rental Invoice, you can check that out at myrentalinvoice.com. If someone moves in the middle of the month, we also have a prorated rent calculation tool that we've also provided a link to. So to recap, get a lease that's going to work for your particular state, negotiate it, and have it reviewed.